Good day, everyone. Today, we will continue discussing the chapter 3, the information search process, the Koltau's legacy. The objective of library and information services and systems is to provide access to sources, information, and ideas. This is one of the famous quote of Koltau's in 2005. In a review of specific approaches to the teaching of library and information skills, Carol C. Koltau in 1987 identified three major models in use for instruction in school library settings in the 1970s and 1980s. This is the source or library tool approach, the fact finder or search strategy approach, and the process approach. The source approach. The source approach to library and information skills features lessons related to the organization of library materials in a particular setting and the location and use of specific reference books, indexes, and other resources that are available there. This how to approach dates from the earliest days of school libraries and is emphasized in the scope sequence. Types of library skills lesson. Because lessons built on this model are generally site-specific and carefully tailored to local sources and local situations, library sessions are relatively easy to plan and conduct. The Pathfinder approach. The Pathfinder model is a search strategy that requires a student to move from one overview or background source, such as an encyclopedia, through a sequence of progressively more specific sources, leading finally to an examination of the most, and presumably the most pertinent resources. This approach is particularly useful for students who lack content knowledge of a topic because it forces them to investigate the topic holistically before moving on to create a specific focused or thesis statement. However, as Koltau in 1987 notes, it is rather rigid approach and may have limited utility outside academic tasks and school assignments, nor thus the Pathfinder approach allow teacher to take account of the cognitive abilities, information needs, learning styles, and information-seeking preferences of individual students. In short, it is a one-size-fits-all instructional strategy. The process model approach. The source and the Pathfinder approaches represent examples of a resource-centered view of library service in that the primary focus is on texts and documents within a specific collection. Process models, on the other hand, consider information skills as pieces of the information-seeking puzzle and can be both better understood and more fully applied if they are practiced within a larger framework. The focus thus moves from one direct instruction of specific resources to a holistic awareness processes involved as the seeker progresses towards a curricular goal. Such approaches are specifically user-centered in that they begin with a statement of the information need as articulated by the student. A number of process models for library skills instruction were developed during the 1980s. The best known models were created by Sheingold in 1986, Collison in 1986, and Koltau in 1987, 1988A, and 1988B. Many of these Models rely on inquiry learning, sometimes referred to as discovery learning rather than direct instructions, and focus the learner's attention as much on the information seeking means as it does on the end product. A major benefit and outcome of teaching this approach is the student's ability to apply understandings of the process across situations, problems, and projects. Shine-Gold, a 1986 approach, is an inquiry model based on educational principles derived from cognitive psychology. As such, it places the learner at the center of instructional interest and make things the central outcome. Make especially Shine-Gold asserts that a child's mind is not an empty base into which information is poured, nor is the library a place where child go to get information. Rather, the library is viewed as an apprentice's workshop for thinking, a place where children actively construct their own understanding through interaction with human, physical, and symbolic words. According to Shine Gold in 1986, inquiry is itself a complex, nonlinear investigative problem-solving process that includes formulating a problem or question, searching through and or collecting information to address the problem or questions, making sense of that information, and developing an understanding of point of view about or answer to the question. Within this framework, student research is a goal-oriented activity in which the learner seeks solutions, solve problems, fill needs, or answer questions. The question children create at each stage in the process serve as frames or reference for information seeking and information collection that drive inquiry forward. These questions, which are formulated and reformulated as new information is gathered and thought about, later become the basis for evaluating the relevance and utility of the information found and resources used. Pre-inquiry model advanced by Callison features a library skills instruction plan that is fully integrated into the curriculum, with the teacher and librarian acting as an instructional team. For this reason, the lessons based on this model required advanced planning and coordination. However, lessons objectives are not prepared in advance. Rather, they are created on an individual basis by students and teachers acting together. Evaluation of student performance is also a responsibility shared by instructors and pupils. Based on the work of Victor, the elements of the inquiry approach to teaching and learning. This is the summary of elements of Callison's free inquiry model. Number one, lessons are planned and taught by librarians and teachers acting together. Second, lesson objectives are evolutionary and negotiated by student and teacher. Number three, students document the processes of learning and shares them with others. Number four, content is driven by questions that students raise and answer by exploring resources in the library and beyond. Next, teachers provide direction for learning, but students are encouraged to take initiatives and work independently. Next, time for the learning activity is flexible. Next, peer tutoring is encouraged. Next, peer interaction and teaming are supported. Next, projects are shared with peers and parents. And lastly, students may choose to extend their learning. Galtau's information search process mode. The most significant contribution to the development of the process approach to teaching and learning in school libraries has been Carol Collier Galtau's research. As it is the only theoretical model that has been empirically tested, Galtau's information search process or ISP model represents a watershed in the development of new strategies for the delivery of library skills instruction. Over the course of 20 years, The model has continued to demonstrate its value as a theoretical construct for examining information behavior and serve as a diagnostic tool for intervention in different information-seeking contexts. For this reason, it deserves special attention and is highlighted here. In brief, Kolthau studies track the creation and testing of model for inquiry-based information seeking. Particularly, is Kolthau's concern for understanding the experience of informations seeking from the point of view of students learners and for sharing her findings with professional as well as academic audience. Her purpose throughout has been to find effective ways to assess students in the information search process, the process of learning from information. Although initially Kultau did not consider the model a formula for teaching or a packaged program of instruction, school librarians were quick to find a value in the straightforward description of the ISP that the model provides. Students and teachers have also found in Kultau's work a vocabulary for discussing ways in which assistance and instruction can be best be delivered, while Kultau's model of the ISP can be understood as representational of a student's thoughts, feelings, and activities related to the conduct of research assignments. The cognitive processes involves the critical thinking, decision making, and problem solving are essentially the same as those identified by scholars as necessary for the development of information literacy. In creating a model to fit her observations, Koltau drew from theoretical frameworks in psychology, education, information science, and communications. In particular, her research builds on the personal construct theory of George Kelly in 1963, the learning theory of John Dewey in 1916 to 1933, the cognitive theory of Jerome Bruner in 1980, information needs theories in the writings of Robert Taylor and Nicholas Belkin in 1980, and the sense-making model created by Brenda Dervin in 1983. Based on her research, Koltau posited that in searching for relevant information, seekers pass through six cognitive stages: initiation, selection, exploration, formulation, collection, and presentation. Added a seventh stage, assessment. At this step, students are asked to reflect on what they have learned about the topic as well as about the ISP as a whole. Although the model appears linear as drawn, Koltau argues that in practice students engage the stages recursively, moving back and forth between them as the process unfolds. Thus, students may have to repeat activities typical of the earlier steps if, for example, they find that they have insufficiently narrowed the topic or failed to locate information sufficient to solve the research problem, and so forth. Following Kelly in 1963, Koltau in 2000 was also interested in tracking students' affective or feelings processes, as well as their cognitive or thinking processes, and doing so, she observed that the feelings of information seekers varied across the course of the ISP, changing from anxiety to optimism, from confusion to clarity, from uncertainty to confidence, and from apprehension to satisfaction or disappointment. The complexity of information seeking and the difficulties that students encounter in their research investigations together with the affective discomforts that such activities often create in novice information seekers, convince Kultao of the need for instructional intervention by school librarians that would provide guidance on learning from the information they have located, and support for students far beyond merely leading students to sources. Verification of Koltao's ISP. Considering its continued usefulness as a pedagogical framework for understanding information seeking in new technologically rich information environments by Koltao and Heimstreu and in TAD 2008, they also tested a model in a study that tracked the ISP for more than 500 students in grades 6 to 12. Specifically, the researchers sought to observe changes at each stage of the ISP, any interactions between feelings and knowledge construction within the context of a collaborative inquiry project, and difficulties in searching. A closer look at Koltao's ISP. Koltao characterized the first step or stage in the ISP process as task initiation. The selection stage of the model is that point in the process when the students choose a question to explore or a topic in which they have an interest. Students generally experience a feelings of optimism. She also found these feelings to be short-lived, fading at the exploration stage, especially when students begin information seeking a topic about which they know little. Two strategies that Koltao suggests may help students work through this stage are reading and reflecting, preparing a list of topic-related ideas that are of interest and relevance to the information seeker. What is unique to Koltao's work is that her consideration of two attitudes or moods exhibited by students in her studies, which she labeled invitational and indicative. When information seekers are in invitational mode, they are open to exploring their topics and they eagerly seek and consider new ideas, new information, and new information sources. When students decide that they have enough information to meet the research needs, they move into an indicative mood, which allows them to end the search and proceed with the presentation and assessment phases of the process. As Koltao notes, an invitational mode is especially important at the initiation and exploration stages when students are trying to understand their topics. An indicative mode, which marks the formulation and collection stages, helps students conclude their searches and especially important when decision must be made regarding the creation of a thesis. Implementing the ISP. To ensure that research projects are directly related to curricular objectives and courses content, Koltao 1993b posit task initiation as the creation of open-ended questions. Koltao in 2004 also believes that interaction with instructor will help students in creating a focus for their topics, constructing a personal perspective, and organizing the information for presentation. Research based in Koltao's ISP model. An impressive number of research studies have drawn on Koltao's 1993b to 1997 pioneering study, and the research stream anchored by Koltao's ISP is unprecedented in the school library literature. When considered together, the insights embedded in study findings have not only extended our understanding of the ISP as Koltao originally described it, but can also be used by librarians in the field to improve and extend both instructions and service. In McNally and Koltao in 1994, Koltau's ISP was presented to students as an instructional model and guide to information-seeking activities. Students were required to keep a log of their activities and their reaction to the readings, and the instructors also used individual conferences to monitor student progress. Instructors found that students' journals were especially helpful to students as they attempted to find an individual focus at the formulation stage. Lorky, in 1994, applied Koltau's theoretical frameworks and methods in an action study of 120 junior high school students involved in a research project that required the use of library resources. Lorky in 1994 also noted students tended to choose topics with which they had some personal experience. Developing a focus represented the most challenging aspect of the process. Watson, 2003, also chose a science topic, the typical science fair project, as the focus of her study of stakeholders' perceptions of such assignments. She recommends that teachers and school library media specialists design projects that allow the students to pursue ideas that intrigue them enough to investigate in more personal and individualistic ways, thus allowing for mistakes and wrong turns that may offer as much information as successful efforts. Pitts 1995 dissertation research used a grounded theory approach to investigate the ISP of grade 10 students whom she considered novice researchers. Students in the study had been assigned a video production project on a science topic of their own choosing. Pitts determined that difficulties students encountered in completing this essentially unstructured research task were related not only to their lack of background knowledge of the subject, but also to their lack of mental models to guide their own information seeking and project completion. Their experiential deficit with research projects of this kind lead them to rely on familiar topics and prior interests, and the convenience and availability of relevant resources. Another reason for project failure was the fact that students did not automatically consider research projects as vehicles for learning course content. Students in Pitt's 1995 study were not given any support for information seeking and use, and this lack of instructional input kept most of them from developing more complex subject-related mental models. She concluded, it is probably true that most people who begin a new research project are at the first novices in the subject matter involved. If those people have expert information seeking and use understandings, however, they know how to use the information skills to strengthen the subject understandings. But if subject understandings and information skills are both weak, students have little chance of being able to progress. McGregor, 1994A to 1994B, look at the information-seeking behavior of high school students while finding information for school research assignments in the school library, the public library, and home sitting. In addition, her findings indicated that students followed an intuitive path without being aware of the processes they used, that their purposes for thinking could be either external or internal to the information, and that Bloom's 1956 taxonomy accurately described their thinking processes throughout the different stages of research. She also found that the nature of the research question affected the complexity of students' thinking during the information-seeking process. Swain's in 1996, the study of college freshmen enrolled in an English class also sheds some light on information seeking and the information search processes of student researchers. Swin's informants also noted that interpersonal interaction and communication were important to success and developing and focusing their topics, and that discussions with parents and peers also had a direct impact on students' selection of both topics and library resources. Bordick's 1996 study involved youth in grades 10 through 12 who were engaged in research activities in their English courses, citing a report published in 1992 that raised concerns that models generally used to guide research projects and assignments might favor males. Bordick elected to test this theory through Koltau's ISP. Koltau's model essentially assumes a generic information searcher using an approach to data collection that Koltau designed when investigating the ISP. Burdick explored gender issues particularly as they related to cognitive and effective information-seeking behaviors and to focused formulation. She found that students demonstrated gender-related differences in their selection of topics and their searching behaviors, and in the feelings they reported experiencing. For example, the girls Bordick observed were more likely to work together and were more reflected than were the boys, while the boys were more active in their approaches to research tasks and less likely to seek assistance. While Bordick did not include the subject area of the topic as a research variable in the study, the tendency on the part of some girls to prefer effective approaches and some boys' preference for logic suggests that there might be a gender associations with either the information seeking or the subject domain of the class in which the process takes place. In addition, study results provided some evidence that girls choose topics about either males or females, while males choose topics only about males. Bordick identified two approaches to information seeking employed by students she observed. She characterized the students using these approaches as navigators and tourists. Whereas navigators tended to follow the phases of Koltau's model quite closely, tourists were much likely to look for answers to their questions through the exploration and collection stages of the ISP and appeared confident about their activities, even though they failed to create a focus. Gordon's 2000 small study of grade 10 science students used Koltau's ISP framework using Think Alouds, interviews, and journals as data sources. Gordon's quasi-experimental study compared searching efficiency and effectiveness of two groups, one of which had received direct instruction and concept mapping as a research activity and one of which had not. In 2000, Brooke reviewed the literature on children's use of the Internet as it related to each stage of Koltau's ISP model. If Brooke's students experienced considerable difficulty selecting a topic, finding a focus at the formulation stage was equally problematic. Harada, in 2002, used Koltau's model as a framework for an action research study that looked at the utility of students' journals in tracking thoughts, feelings, and actions of elementary school children aged 10 to 11 involved in a complex information-seeking task that grew out of content covered in the classroom. Heinz Schuem 2006b used Koltau's ISP to study the information seeking of middle school students and the roles played by motivations and intentions and their searching behavior. Heldiga RD 2009 found that ISP model was less useful in understanding the experiences of graduate students when seeking information as members of a small group. Koltau's intervention model, taxonomy of service assistance. Koltau's research has contributed many insights to our understanding of the ISP and knowledge of how students learn from information. The fact that students not only need but also welcome such assistance, support, and encouragement, particularly during the initial stages of the ISP, is also an important finding. In building a model to guide instructional intervention levels, supports of information seekers, Koltau turned the work of Lee Vygotsky, especially his theory of zones of proximal development. In Vygotsky view, there are certain moments in the child development when instruction is most effective, that is times during which the child's cognitive elaboration is most likely to occur. Vygotsky called these moments as a zones of proximal development. Specifically, each zone creates an instructional space that represents the distance between a child's actual level of development as an independent problem solvers and potential level of development. Vygotsky believed that through careful observation of a child's present level of functioning, a prospective teacher should be able to identify, plan, and support learning activities to match each child's proximal zone. For example, the teacher first sets a goal and provides a scaffolding in the form of direction, demonstrations, and strategies that the child can use in reaching the goal, and then guides the child in enacting that activity. When this initial goal is reached, the teacher offers a new and more difficult one. Thus, by Vygotsky's view, the child does not alone possess a zone of proximal development, but rather shares one with his or her instructor. Koltau has suggested 5 rules for library media specialists based on taxonomy of 5 levels of interventions. These are organizer, lecturer, instructor, tutor, and counselor. An organizer level. Acting at an organizer level, the library media specialist prepares the context for learning by selecting, arranging, organizing, and managing resources so that information is available in a wide variety of topics, formats, and media. And locator or lecturer level. When operating at the locator level, school librarians provide students an overview of library resources, services, policies with a focus on the location of particular items. An identifier or instructor level. At the identifier level, the library media specialist provides lessons on specific resources or sources and types of sources and their usefulness to students involved in specific kinds of information tasks. An advisor or tutor level. Providing instruction at the advisor or tutor level requires that the library media specialist plan a series of sessions to demonstrate the sequential use of a variety of information resources. And counselor level. Instruction provided at the counselor level is truly process instruction and is most often conducted over time. Instruction in identifying and interpreting information to address an evolving problem requires instructors to be there for students, providing active assistance whenever the students feel uncertain as to how to proceed. Vygotsky's model of zones of proximal development can also be useful in describing the levels of assistance that students might require at particular points in their ISP. In this model, each higher level assumes the provisions of services at all preceding levels. For example, students operating in Zone 1 require no direct intervention, although their ability to conduct research independently assumes access to a library that is well organized and managed to maximize physical and intellectual access to information. Organizer-level assistance might include comprehensible signs, information sheets, pathfinders, and computer-based virtual library tours. When operating in Zone 2, a student will require the help of the librarian in locating information to solve a fact-based or ready reference questions. Students with Zone 3 information needs will require assistance and instruction in finding and using a number of library resources. At Zone 4, the students' information problems will call for the presentation of sources and a sequence and instruction in their use. At Zone 5, the students' information needs may require a conference with the librarian to discuss the processes involved in the ISP and learning from the information collected. Inquiry learning, a new framework for information literacy instruction. According to its proponents, inquiry learning centers on the research process but mimics real-life context, where learners consider problems, developing strategies, and seek solutions. For children to own their own learning, they need to own their own questions by Dunham et al. 2001. Inquiry learning enables students to meaningfully accomplish the objectives of the curriculum by preparing them for living and learning in the world outside of the school. The impact of online resources. Mankal, Lodish, and Springer believe that online resources create authentic context for learning because their use replicates real-world complexities and provides access to perspectives and viewpoints that stretch students and encourage them to think critically. The availability of online resources in school libraries has also created opportunities for independent learning. Voronov's in 1994, research indicates that computers have been useful in supporting inquiry-based science teaching, inclusion of students with disabilities in regular classes, inter-district collaboration, and distance learning. In Irving's 1990, a study also confirmed that online resources facilitated children's independent pursuit of academic topics of individual interest, observing that their use provided information for personal decision-making when the library's own collection offered little support. Guided inquiry learning, moving beyond the ISP. And guided inquiry students are seen as active agents and constructions of their own personal topical comprehension. This view of learning includes motivation and emotions by vital for lasting knowledge construction. A key concept in guided inquiry is transformation, when a student's understanding of a topic translates into knowledge at a deeper level. The most compelling new building block for ISP work previously carried out by the Koltau et al. 2007, however, is the notion of third space. The knowledge and nurturing of this concept lays the foundation for learners to successfully use the guided inquiry model developed for the ISP model from previous work by Manutes. Third space represents the merging of first space, an individual's varied life experiences outside the school setting, and the second space, the curriculum content of the classroom. Other researchers have also studied the concept of third space, especially in the area of discourse, as a way to examine the blending of informal and formal talk between the teachers and students. It is interesting to note that hints of third space can be seen in Dewey's discussion of the function of the school and the child's social life. We all know how self-centered the little child is. His horizon is not large. An experience must come immediately home for him, if he is to be sufficiently interested to relate it to others. The changes in our understanding of teaching and learning in the library context are profound. The sophistication of ideas and strategies will serve school librarians well as they continue in pursuit of new strategies to inform practice and assist students in deepening understandings and enhancing competence. That would be all. Thank you so much.